Welcome everyone to community prayer this week. We have three esteemed speakers with us today, and they will speak on the theme God and Liberation, Multi-Faith Reflections on Passover. Before we start, I will introduce uh, each of them briefly. First one, Ms. Gilana Levavi. She currently serves as social media coordinator and part-time support staff for the Dean's Office for Harvard Seminary. She is also doing a supplemental teaching at the Jewish Religious School. Second is Mr. Alan Joseph, who is a graduate of the IPP, same with Gilana, and also a graduate of Harvard Seminary MA program from India. Right now, he is working as the Dean of an Evangelical Theological College in the southern state of Kerala, India. He is also involved in a full online theological training center based in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. He is married with a daughter. And the last one, but not the least, Ms. Nanik Yulianti is IPP graduate from Indonesia. She is currently teaching Islamic studies online. So her students are spreading in different countries, from Indonesia, Hong Kong, London, Singapore, Netherlands, New Zealand, and others. So we will start our time of meditation and prayer. And we'll start by reading the scripture from Exodus 12, verses 21 to 27. Then Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go, select lambs for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and touch the lintel and the two doorposts with the blood in the basin. None of you shall go outside the door of your house until morning, for the Lord will pass through to strike down the Egyptians. When he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, the Lord will pass over that door and will not allow the destroyer to enter your houses to strike you down. You shall observe this rite as a perpetual ordinance for you and for your children. When you come to the land that the Lord will give you, as he has promised, you shall keep this observance. And when your children ask you, 'What do you mean by this observance?' you shall say, 'It is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, for he passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt when he struck down the Egyptian, but spared our houses.' And the people bowed down and worshiped." And then I will play a song. It is in Indonesian language, so perhaps except me and Mbak Nanik, no one will really understand the lyrics, but I give you the translation. So I hope you enjoy the song.
Ku nyanyikan kasih setia Tuhan selamanya, selamanya. Ku nyanyikan kasih setia Tuhan selamanya, ku nyanyikan selamanya. Ku tuturkan padamu kasih setiamu Tuhan. Ku tuturkan padamu kasih setiamu turun temurun. Ku nyanyikan kasih setia Tuhan selamanya, selamanya. Ku nyanyikan kasih setia Tuhan selamanya, ku nyanyikan selamanya. Ku nyanyikan kasih setia Tuhan selamanya, selamanya. Ku nyanyikan setia Tuhan selamanya, ku nyanyikan selamanya. Ku tuturkan padamu kasih setiamu Tuhan. Ku tuturkan padamu kasih setiamu turun temurun. Ku nyanyikan kasih setia Tuhan selamanya, selamanya. Ku nyanyikan kasih setia Tuhan selamanya, ku nyanyikan selamanya.
Right now, it's time for our three speakers to share their wisdom. First, Gilana, please.
Sorry, one moment. Okay. Okay, great. Shalom, assalamu alaikum. Greetings of peace to all. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some thoughts with you today. So Pesach, or Passover, begins this Saturday night. As part of the Seder, the set of readings, discussions, songs, and symbolic and festive eating that happens on the first nights of Passover, we read this line: B'chol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. In every generation, each person must see themselves as if they had come out of Egypt. Many of the rituals of the Seder are designed to evoke this experiential connection to liberation. I would like to share two ideas that help me to relate to the theme of God and liberation. The first idea is based on an essay on Parshat Mishpatim, a portion of the book of Exodus. And this particular essay was written by Rabbi Nancy Fuchs Kramer, who is a leader in interfaith work who has spent much of her career at the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College outside of Philadelphia. She quotes the following two verses from Exodus. First, you should not wrong a stranger, nor should you oppress them, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. And second, you should not oppress a stranger, for you understand the heart of the stranger. According to Rabbi Eliezer in Talmud, similar statements to those two verses are made 36 times in the Torah. Rabbi Fuchs Kramer writes that the Exodus narrative, that narrative of the Israelites' enslavement and liberation, obligates us in these and other commandments about proper treatment of the other, the stranger. It is through seeing oneself as part of this story, a story that includes slavery, hardship, and trauma, that one takes on the obligation to desist from oppression and to treat all people with justice and equity. I find godliness in my connection to this narrative and in the obligation that stems from it. Liberation from Egypt does not imply breaking free entirely from the story or from the nefesh, the soul or heart of the stranger. Rather, we carry this story with us. The struggles and bitterness of slavery are transformed into a force for good that continues to guide and obligate us in pursuing justice and equity. The second idea that I would like to share is based on a teaching that I heard from Rabbi Mike Moskowitz, scholar in residence for trans and queer Jewish studies at Congregation Beit Simchat Torah, the world's largest LGBTQ synagogue. Rabbi Moskowitz spoke about the revelation of the first of the 10 commandments as a moment of God's coming out to the people. The first commandment reads, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, the house of bondage. This doesn't really tell the Israelites anything that they need to do. It seems like it might not even be so much of a commandment. Rather, it's a statement of identity. And Rabbi Moskowitz pointed this out. I was thinking about this notion of God coming out as I thought about the encounter between God and Moses at the burning bush. In this more intimate one-on-one conversation, God also introduces God's self to Moses. God tells Moses that God is the God of Moses' ancestors. When Moses asks, what should I say when the people ask, what's your name? God says, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, a phrase often translated as I am who I am, or I will be what I will be. Based on Rabbi Moskowitz's idea, I see the potential to relate to this moment as a coming out moment for God. So often, conversations in which individuals reveal stigmatized or previously hidden or vulnerable parts of their identity or experiences happen in one-on-one conversations. Such conversations, in my experience, can be liberating. When Moshe tries to ask God for a name, God responds, I am who I am. God is sharing God's identity on God's terms, rather than letting others try to define or limit God based on their own perceptions or biases. Thought of in this way, this conversation was perhaps a liberating moment for God, as God was able to share God's identity. In addition, this conversation between Moshe and God was necessary for the Israelites' liberation from Egypt to happen. My wish is that we may work to carry with us stories and experiences that begin in bitterness and hardship, but in such a way that transforms these narratives into forces for good that obligate us in the continual pursuit of justice and equity. I also hope that we may find liberation in the dialogues and conversations that enable the sharing of these narratives and of diverse identities and experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the second, Ellen.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. And it is evening here in India. I'm so happy and excited to meet with you all, albeit in this virtual platform. I'm so happy because most of you are very, very dear to me, and I wish I had time to greet everybody, calling your name. So I'm so happy and excited, and I really, really thank Dr. Hans for inviting me to be a part of this community prayer service. I'm asked to share a reflection from the same passage that Dr. Hans has just read from a Christian perspective. So Exodus chapter 12 is a very interesting passage as far as Christians are concerned, because we are also going through a time of Lent and prayer and Passover season. And chapter 12 verse 6 says that you shall have a lamb, 1-year-old lamb without any blemish, and you shall keep it for a few days. And on the 14th day, you shall kill the lamb, and on twilight you shall kill it. One version says that between the evenings you shall kill it. And Christians have understood this passage to be so meaningful, because Paul later on, when he was writing the epistles, he says that Christ, our Passover lamb, has been slain. And Christians always understood this passage was referring to the crucifixion of Jesus, because this, as I said, chapter 12 verse 6 says that you shall smite, you shall kill, slaughter the lamb on twilight, between the evenings. That's a very interesting word terminology, I think. That is because Christians have always understood as Christ always died in between heaven and earth, in between God and man, in between the history, in between the division of history. But what does it actually say? I think this actually sets the tone and mood of melancholy, kind of a blue tone. The lamb, it says that the lamb should be 1-year-old, meaning we tend to understand that this talks about actually the perfection of God in an allegorical, anthropomorphic way. Christians has always understood that God's perfection and human sin is always contrasted in this passage. So one way or other, this actually talks about human sin. Even if you are not someone who believes in original sin, I'm sure that you will be still believing that we as a species have wrongdoings. We have sinned, we have shortcomings, our misdemeanor has caused havoc to the society. So when we talk about Passover, the first thing that comes to my mind from a Christian perspective is about human offense, human sin. And secondly, as you are aware, this is also a passage of judgment. This is actually the final judgment, the 10th, the final judgment. And the previous chapter actually talks something very, very interesting. In chapter 11, God is asking the Israelites to borrow jewelry of gold and jewelry of silver, which is always kind of a embarrassing passage to the Christians, because God is in a way asking us to cheat. This is interesting, because after a couple of days, He's going to provide Israelites with 10 commandments, and one of the commandments is that you shouldn't cheat. You shall not lie. So how do we make sense of it? One of the meanings we can draw from this passage, from this idea, is that is the people of Egypt. I'm not talking about the present day Egypt, as you know. The then Egyptians, they enjoyed the benefits at the expense of the people of Israel. So in a way, God is saying that, you know what, you deserve it. You deserve that gold, because that is your sweat and your blood. So I'm not going to the ethics of it, but then, what I'm trying to say is that there is a justice side to Passover. God is a God of justice. God is a just God. So whatever is going on around us, there is a justice in all these things. God is a God of justice. And I want to close by saying one more thing. When I was a very, very young undergraduate theological student in India, I happened to read a poem by an Indian theologian called Stanley Samartha. And later on, when I went to Hartford to do my IPP and the other studies, I came to know that Dr. Stanley Samartha was a student, an alum of Hartford Seminary. And the poem, the theological poem, goes like this. The title is Lord's Wife. The biblical character Lord and his wife. So the poem goes like this. How can Lord, He can forget these people and He can run to safety. But how can I forget my neighbors so easily? They have been my friends. I can't forget them. That's why I turn back. So the final point I want to make from this passage is that the beauty of this passage and this meaning is that we are not supposed to overjoy. There is a beautiful story in Talmud regarding this passage. After this Passover event, people of Israel crossing the Red Sea, and what happened? Egyptians were drawn into Red Sea, and the people of Israel were so happy; they were overjoyed. And under the leadership of Miriam, they began to clap their hands and dance. And by saying this, the angels in heaven, they also began to join with the human beings, and they were overjoyed. And God became so sad at this side, and He's asking the angels in heaven, you know what? I can understand why human beings are overjoying. they are celebrating because they are just humans. But why you guys, why you are happy? Don't you understand that I have equal pain in the destruction of the Egyptians? So the final point I want to make from this passage is that this is not about us. This actually Passover talks about the fact that we are not supposed to. How can we? How can we marry? How can we be happy when people have lost their dear ones around us? Yeah, of course, COVID has somehow left us, or we are escaped from the pandemic. But what about those people? How can we really celebrate when we know that so many people lost their dear ones, so many people lost their husbands, wives, friends? So this Passover season reminds us of the fact that we are not supposed to be overjoyed. We must be thankful. And like I said, it talks about human um, uh, offense. And also it talks about the fact that there is a God who is a just God. And finally, whatever happens, we are not supposed to be overjoyed. We just, accept um, one at a time. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. And then our last speaker is Nanik Yulianti.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Hans, and also good day, everyone. It's late night in here, but I'm really happy and I'm really excited to see everyone who color my life for this past 1 or 2 years, I guess. Okay, so in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most gracious. Assalamualaikum. Good day, everyone, again. I hope that everyone stays healthy and happy. So in this wonderful moment, also appreciating and reflecting the Passover, it is my pleasure and honor to be able to share my personal reflection on liberation and also on God and liberation. As you see, as a Muslim, I try to always believe that being obedient and also following the path of Allah is the reason of our creation. As Allah said in the Holy Quran, and I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me. Indeed, even in a very general understanding, following the path of others and doing what we do not want to do means that we are not free, that we have no liberation for ourselves. But what does it actually mean to be free? To do whatever we want to do? Sometimes doing everything we want to do, following everything we hear from the inside can actually mean the real slavery. We are the slave of ourselves, of our own desire. Honestly, I myself still, it's really difficult for me to differentiate what or whose voices are coming from the inside. Is it coming from my soul or my desire? Is it the call from the God or the temptation of evil? Should I follow it? Should I leave it? Or should I even against it? And also, Ibn Taymiyyah, a 13th century Muslim scholar, said that how many of us will be able to overcome our desires and resist the temptation of sin? How many of us even lower our gaze when we look upon something that we are not supposed to? The real prisoner is the one whose heart has been kept away from remembering his Lord. And the real captive is the one who has been captivated by his whims and desires. Since I still need more practice and also struggle in understanding my own voice, my own soul, remembering and following the path of Allah, learning and reflecting His revelation and the life and teachings of His Prophet is the best way I can do for now. And many times, it is not easy to ignore our desires, of course, to choose to do good and to leave the bad. We need to practice, to struggle, to wrestle, and to do jihad. That is why the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he returned from the one of his struggle, he said, "You have come from the smaller jihad to the greater jihad." His companion said, "What is the greater jihad, O Messenger of Allah?" He said, "The servant struggle against his lust." To be free from ourselves, from our desires, we need to struggle. Also, just like the freedom of the people of Israel from Egypt. It was also not without struggle. As Ellen said, there were also many to left behind. Therefore, we also need to struggle and evaluate ourselves to get rid of, or at least to lessen the evil habits and desires, to acquire more noble human character, and to perform better actions than before. We must realize that committing sin takes away the essence of our humanity. And when we think it is too hard to struggle by ourselves, sometimes it is really okay to reach out and follow others. We don't actually need to do everything ourselves. Just like the Israelites who reached out to Prophet Musa, and also Prophet Musa who also asked God to let his brother Prophet Harun to help him. From them, we also learn that everyone may need and reach others. Furthermore, Prophet Musa and Prophet Harun choose not to be ignorant. They choose to accept the call and to follow their Lord's command to do good and help others. Because why doing it alone when we can do it together? Every living being in this universe is within the range of God's divine. He fulfills all our needs without having any need of our adoration. Whether we obey him or not, it makes no difference to him. It is for the sake of our benefit that he has told us to do good and leave the bad. I am a Muslim who believes in God, the all creator, the one who creates everything. So it is understandable if I and many other believers want to live our lives in the way that will please our God. So we make effort to live as Allah has instructed us, following the rules of the faith, being devoted to Allah, doing what we can do to help ourselves and others. Indeed, living God's way is quite a struggle. God sets high standards, and we have to fight with our own selfish desires. Therefore, during the whole journey of struggle against self, we should constantly remember God and the graces bestowed by him. Remembering and concentrating on the intention of our creation, we must pray to God for his protection, guide, and help. We must also thank him constantly for his help, mercy, and guidance in fulfilling our intention. Moreover, in this pandemic era, where we are surrounded by uncertainty, following the path of God might give us sense of safety and help us to be happy. When we know who or what to follow, that is what I, for now, consider the real freedom and liberation, because then we are able to feel safe instead of drowned in uncertainty. Following the path of God is the way to be free. We might find our freedom within the rules and order. Most of all, we need to always remember that every freedom and liberation has its responsibilities. When we are following the path of God, it means we are being responsible and grateful. We are fulfilling our duties toward God, who brought us into this world, bestowed us with sound body and brain, and equipped us with intellect and capabilities to manifest God's name in our every thought, words, and actions. God also sent prophets and his holy books as a means of guidance and salvation. The aim of this life and purpose of all these blessings is more noble than just to follow desires and evil tendencies that are temporary. For me, the one who is free, the one who can attain the liberation, are the one who succeeded in purifying their souls, in following the path of God, in doing good for others, and of course, for ourselves. So these two verses of the Quran may conclude the reflection of ours today, of mine, sorry. So by the soul and by him who made it perfect and then inspired it to understand what is wrong and what is right for it. Truly is successful the one who purifies his soul. And the other one is, as for him who feared to stand before his Lord and he restrained himself from his desires, then paradise will be his refuge. Thank
Believe you probably all read the blessing. And so next week it will be Ayanda Nuksani and Dr. Andrew Gardner. So please join us then and do stick around for Holy Grounds. And thank you everyone for joining us. It was great to have our speakers today, and we really appreciate it, and see you at the Holy Grounds.